Wlop, also known as Wang Ling, has become a household name in the digital art community. His work is characterized by breathtaking landscapes, compelling characters, and masterful play of colors and lighting. And because of that, I copied him. Like, it's not really copying, but we get to that. First of all, we have to analyze his drawings and how he draws. When you go your first time on his Instagram profile, you get really fast overwhelmed. Like, what the frick are these drawings? Incredible backgrounds and even more incredible characters. But now let's take a closer look at them. I would say let's start with his backgrounds. And here we have like two categories: indoor and outdoor drawings. I obviously know that literally every artist has these categories, but in my opinion, it's definitely different with Wlop. I mean, look at that. So let's start with his indoor backgrounds. And we directly see that he uses often churches, castles or cathedrals. For those buildings he often uses Baroque, Rococo and Gothic architecture. And we begin to realize that there are many details. But those details are making his drawings much more interesting, and it gives the whole drawing that overwhelming vibe. When we look closer, we can see that his backgrounds are very rough, but you can directly tell what it shows. And to be honest, from further distance it looks even crazy detailed. But now let's talk about the coloring and rendering. And we see that he is often using a very bright light source. And of course that light will reflect on our character and the environment, like for example the facade in the churches. And we can see here and there some complementary colors. Now let's shift to some outdoor backgrounds. And here we got also like two categories: the real world and the fantasy world. And spoiler, both worlds are absolutely mesmerizing. I mean, there's a goddamn dragon, it has to be cool, right? But of course, he also combines these two worlds together, like in this example. You know, the city could be real, the character could be real, but then you see this kind of violin that is looking like a sword that plays music, so completely out of space. In this drawing we see that he went full fantasy. Like, it gives me so much Elden Ring vibes. And again, we see a crazy gothic building in the background, which is upside down. The creativity and effort is just insane and remarkable. Especially because Wlop is actually a software engineer and he sees drawing like an hobby. And that's the craziest part in my opinion. Here we got an example of a real world drawing. We see that the background is very grey and dark, but nevertheless we can identify everything. Again, there are just some brush strokes, but it looks so detailed and even the lighting is perfect. But now let's take a closer look at his characters. And by the way, if you want a more detailed video about his drawings, definitely check out my last video where I talk about how pros really draw. Alright, but what makes a character a Wlop character? And I would definitely say jewelry. Like, he uses it for almost every character and we can see why. It makes his drawings look stunning. And the drawing feels more completed and more filled. Imagine that drawing without any accessories. Here is how the drawing looks without any of the jewelry. And as we can see, it's obviously an amazing drawing, but it looks much more empty now. And by the way, I did that with this spot healing brush in Photoshop. But of course, jewelry isn't the only special characteristic in his drawings. We see that his eyes are regular big, and I noticed that he draws his nose always like this. Like, it goes always up, and that is obviously inspired by the anime art style. But in comparison, his drawings got a nose bridge, which gives the character a realistic touch. When we look at the skin, we notice that he loves subsurface scattering. You may ask, what is that? That means that the skin absorbs the light and it usually turns orange. Here we can directly see where he amplifies the light bouncing that goes from the orange background to the skin. And if you want to learn from the man himself, he got a Patreon and a Gumroad where he makes tutorials. So now that we know some basic stuff about his drawings, let's take a look at how he approaches them. Firstly, he starts with a very rough sketch where are no connecting lines. After that, he doesn't start with the coloring, like for example Sam. He starts with grayscaling. That means that he focuses on the values in his drawings. And he does all that with kind of sculpturing. After that, he literally has a black and white drawing. When he's done with all that, he set up his color curves. Here we can see in Procreate how that actually works. At the left we have the shadows, in the middle we got the midtones, and on the right side the highlights. And he does that to get the colors right and that they really pop out. After he puts some base colors on it, he draws some very rough details. And what I notice is that he's always like changing his color curves, so the lighting and the colors are even more perfect. Finally, we are at the detailing stage. What should I say, guys? The details are just amazing. I mean, so many small details that takes definitely insane patience. Finally, he draws the highlights and he is pretty much done with his drawing. And now that we know all that, let's start drawing. And I wanted to start with a portrait. I started using his drawing as a reference for me, just to get like the taste of how he draws and how he uses colors. First of all, I made a sketch, and as you can see, it's not that rough. After that, I drew the background, which was, thank God, just orange. And then I've put the base colors for the skin. And then the first struggle started. I wanted to draw firstly just two values to not get too overwhelmed. And yeah, that wasn't great. But then I was kind of happy with it and added the third color to get a nice bounce effect. Then I colored the face, and I had especially two spots where I struggled the most. And these were the both cheeks. Like, I really didn't know how and which color to put where. But I have to say that I am literally the worst person at coloring. But don't worry, I'm practicing and there will be definitely a video one day. Then I colored the eyes and realized, alright, these bad boys are too big. And the eyeball, like you know, the white parts on the eye were way too bright. Of course my mistakes didn't end here. I really messed up the lips, and you know, I tried here and there, but finally I ended up with this goofy. But that's okay, that was just in study, and I realized my mistakes so I can improve on the next drawings. After I was done with the skin, I began to add the jewelry and the accessories. And I actually thought this gonna be the easiest part of this whole drawing. But guess what? I struggled. Finally, I finished drawing the hair. For that I was using this kind of brush and put it roughly on the hair area. First I used some darker colors and went brighter and brighter. And here we got our first portrait. Am I happy with it? No. Of course I know that I could fix here and there some things. You have to know that I don't have that much time, and you know, I wanted that for the video, so I hope you can forgive me for that. But did I learn something? Of course. First of all, which colors he's using. Like for example with the eyelashes. We see white brush strokes, which gives them a way cooler look. Then of course, like some drawing techniques like with the hair. Now let's get to a background reference. And here you see, oh boy, there are many details. Alright, pause. I actually learned grayscaling and how that works, so ignore all that what I'm saying and just watch what I'm drawing. I learned grayscaling. Don't wonder, I'm in Poland with my family. It's Christmas. Let's get further. I'm sorry. Yeah. I started with sketching the character first, and that was actually so much fun. Like to get all the details, the armor, it was just nice. But then again, the struggle started. I've started sketching the background, and here was my enemy clearly perspective. Not only that, I couldn't fit everything in that space. I mean, there is so much stuff going on that I just gave it up and was happy with that. After that, I put some base colors first on the character and then the background. And here it was extremely helpful because you know where the light sources are and how it's gonna affect your character. Then I started with the coloring, and oh my god, was that exhausting. Like, of course it was fun, but then I realized I was zooming way too much in, and that means I worked slow. But it was great to learn where the light comes from and how it's gonna affect your environment. Last but not least, I draw some details, and again, very overwhelming. Finally, I added the highlights. And here we got our finished piece. Of course it's not perfect, but you know, you have to start somewhere, right? So I highly recommend you to try things you're scared of. For example, there is a very insane reference, just go for it, because that's the only way how you improve. And even if it looks bad, at least you tried it. Alright, now we even draw some of his drawings. Now it's time to draw our own character in our own fantasy world. For that I took this reference, because I didn't feel confident enough to combine a character reference with a background reference. Again, I started with a sketch, and in this time I've tried to make it more rough. After I was done with the character, I started with the background. code. And again, very rough. And then I started with grayscaling, and yeah, finding the right values and to work simplified was not that easy. The detailing stage was again very fun. Many details I've tried to not zoom too hard in, and I added some jewelry to her head. Finally the highlights, and here I was very lucky with the reference because it showed the highlights pretty well, and we all know you go through Pinterest and there are many references, but many harder references, and yeah. And we are pretty much done with our first drawing. And am I happy with it? Actually yes, because it's 100% our own drawing. So in conclusion, this study was very helpful. And maybe you could learn something today. This was it for today, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. And I wanted to say sorry that I was inactive for the last 3 weeks. You know, I had a lot to do in my apprenticeship, but now the grind starts again. See you soon and peace out.